Alright, so you guys wanted to hear stuff about hardcore music. I really like it, so this is something I'm really passionate about. I like talking about it. And, today I'm going to be talking about kind of just like the overview of most of the relatively like popular-ish, or contemporary genres that are kind of more in, I guess, right now, if you're talking about in like trend sense. This isn't going to be super in-depth. I'm not going to be talking about like really obscure genres such as like hard NRG, which isn't really out there anymore, Machina, which isn't really out there anymore. If you really want stuff like that, you can find videos online easily or just search it up online. There are plenty of places you can look. Just look, like Reddit has probably some answers. Wikipedia probably has something at least. This is more like an intermission video, honestly, while I work on my story of like Madness Combat thing. That's kind of complicated as hell. People really wanted it, and hopefully I don't attract the toxic side of Madness Combat, because I know that I've been aware of how bad it's been, but yeah, it's bad. Hopefully I don't attract that. Funny story, actually, while I was making this video, or at least recording it, this is my second take. The video that I used at least took a little bit of cross-referencing, because I mentioned that there was, in my post, I mentioned that there was another video that already did like this whole tree map, I guess, of like hardcore subgenres and how they evolved. That video got taken down because of the whole CSAC thing going on right now, which is kind of interesting, so technically now I'm the only one doing it. Anyways, yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this one. Alright, so let's start with the basic, like, 4 kinds of subgenres. I'll start with old school hardcore. It's not insanely fast or anything, it's more of like a bouncy beat, very old iconic synths. They're very loud, and the bass isn't too heavy on these kinds of songs either. That's something that definitely will change over time. It's very hard to explain because it does kind of mix in with the older version of this, which is Gabber, which is like I think it's like from the Netherlands. It's very old. It definitely feels dated, but it's really cool still in a way to listen to it. This is also like old. I'm talking about generic old school like hardcore. It definitely would change over time, which is definitely something I'm going to be talking about. And it's interesting because Gabber itself is a version. Old school hardcore is a version of Gabber, and there's kind of a transitional period from Gabber to old school hardcore that nobody is really certain where it kind of happened, but it's something that happened over a long period of time, like maybe a year or so, and that's how old school hardcore was born. Very old. I don't really listen to it too much, but I think it's pretty cool, and yeah. Alright, so old school hardcore is kind of like the keystone, like the center of everything. It's kind of like where everything starts. If you want to think about it one way, it's kind of like imagine like a food pyramid, and this is like at the top, and everything kind of comes down from the bottom, I guess. I don't know. How do things branch off? You might be wondering. Well, let's start with hardstyle. I don't really know where this kind of subgenre came from, but it's pretty easy to identify. You have these loud and shredding kicks and a lot of distortion. It's not too fast, unlike later genres, but, it's still really, really loud and distorted. You hear it in the kicks, bass, synths, everything. It's very easy to spot. This is kind of like the start of the distortion, I guess, category of genres. And, usually when hardstyle kind of first started, it was kind of slow, but then as it kind of continued, it became a little bit faster. And then there's also another version of it called raw style, which is just basically more of like a punk version of hardstyle. Had a darker focus, more heavy kicks, I guess. They're not really too different. And then there's also euphoric hard and raw style, which is, instead of having such heavy kicks, they still have heavy kicks, but it has a heavier focus on like the melody and things like that. And that is definitely more prevalent. And you'll definitely notice that in some of the later hardstyle songs, because a lot of later hardstyle is mostly euphoric, and a lot of the like old school styles, which was just pure hardstyle, kind of died out. Okay, next genre is speedcore. It's just fast hardcore, at least that's how it started out. Speedcore, I would like to mention, has changed a lot. If you compare old artists compared to maybe like Coario, someone who makes a lot of newer, I guess, speedcore, it definitely is different. But in general, how it originally started was just fast hardcore. Much faster, actually. BPM tends to vary. I usually classify it as maybe about 200 or 220 plus BPM, but some people say more, like 300. If you want good examples, Big Black, if you've ever heard that song, you probably have. Things like that. Now, speedcore, again, has other offshoots, like all of these genres. Splittercore, terrorcore, and extratone. Not the most popular, honestly, but I would like to mention extratone's pretty interesting. It's where the kicks become so fast, it creates like a single high-pitched noise, and it's very ambient. It's very interesting. It's very contrasting compared to, I guess, speedcore, which is normally very intense and very hype. This is very relaxing. It's just something I thought I'd point out. Yeah, and this is kind of where the speed category of genres kind of came up. I just thought I'd mention it. Obviously, I think it's a very important genre. So yeah. And the final one I wanted to talk about was breakcore, which is kind of different compared to these. A lot of these are offshoots of hardcore, like just hardcore. This is more like a mix between jungle, the jazz genre, and hardcore. And, you know, the most iconic part of this genre is the amen break. But, you know, breakcore doesn't necessarily have to have the amen break. That's just what a lot of songs use. I would like to classify breakcore more as it's like very crazy. It's got a lot of samples, got a lot of broken up drums. You know, Category's Angel Salad is a great example. It's pretty easy to spot the breakcore style without an amen break in it. And another notable thing about modern breakcore is, as I mentioned, heavy use of sampling, especially with regards to the amen break. You know, which yeah, the amen break has an interesting history. If you guys are ever curious, I might talk about it one day. And you know, a lot of vocal samples as well. Breakcore BPMs in general, when it comes to BPM, honestly pretty fast, relatively intense, obviously. And yeah. Okay, so how do these like 4 genres kind of merge together? Well, let's start with, I guess, uptempo, which is kind of like if you took hardstyle and you made it really, really fast. It's like kind of like speedcore. It started when this DJ sped up a raw style track so fast, like really, really fast, or faster than I guess it was like intended. It was like this raw style track, and it became very loud, high pitched, very ear shredding, kick focused song. You know, it became much faster. Again, ear shredding kicks. That's kind of, and that defined a lot of uptempo. You know, uptempo now, when you get just like that is, you know, just like that, like I guess remix or like speed up. It's fast, no melodies at all, purely focused on the kicks, nothing else. Uptempo is stereotyped usually as very dark for this reason, you know, because it's just the kicks and it can be very, yeah, if you listen to it, it's pretty intense. If you actually listen to it for too long, you'll probably get a headache. And if you blast it in your ears, it'll probably give you a headache. Because if you listen to it, the kicks are like super distorted. They are some, I don't even know if they're kicks anymore. They're just noises at a certain point. It's very interesting, and I think it's probably one of the most distorted genres I know of that isn't like experimental, at least. And I definitely think it's interesting. This is not for everyone though. It is such a crazy genre. Alright, so next genre I want to bring up is Frenchcore. Now, I know French sounds scary, everyone hates the French, but Frenchcore is pretty good, you know? Frenchcore tends to sound a lot like hardstyle, but it is pretty different, and especially modern hardstyle, not hardstyle, Frenchcore is very, very different, and the key difference comes down to this single little thing. You see, when kicks play in a hardcore song, usually most time the kicks and the bass play at the same time. You have a kick and the bass play at the same time, and you can usually hear it's pretty obvious if you really, really pay attention to that part. Again, maybe for some people though, in certain songs it's a lot harder to pick up, but Frenchcore has a different kind of take. You see, the kick plays, and then it's the bass right after, so it goes kick bass, and that's how that kind of works. You can hear it if you listen really close enough that the kick and the bass are completely separate, and you know, if basically the guide is this. Kick and bass at the same time means it's not Frenchcore, and when they're kind of separated, Frenchcore. Now, Frenchcore in general also has different forms, and it's really easily seen when you compare it to like hardstyle, like how different it is. Not just the bass, but the styles and levels of distortion, because just like, you know, hardstyle, Frenchcore is distorted here. Here are 2 different examples of songs. Hopefully friggin', you know, CSAC doesn't screw me over or something somehow. So yeah, you kind of hear the difference there. You know, if you're paying attention to the bass and kick, you probably heard them, you know, separated and different. Anyways, there's also a version called French tempo, which is basically having up-tempo ear-shredding kicks and that same offset bass. You know, if you're interested in Frenchcore in general, just listen to people such as Yoroko or Jayagi. They both have SoundCloud art. They're both SoundCloud artists that are honestly like bangers, and they're pretty notable, and I like them a lot. It should be noted, however, I would like to say that Frenchcore in general tends to be very varied, and just because a song has a offset bass doesn't mean it's Frenchcore. It could be a completely different genre. A lot of songs tend to use that now. Just know that that distortion does play a level in its identity. Alright, so on to mashcore, which is basically just if you took breakcore and just made it really crazy. Like, I guess if you wanted to merge 2 freaking genres, like it's like Infinite Craft. I guess it's like if you took speedcore and breakcore. A lot of people kind of consider mashcore and breakcore to be the same if you don't really know the key differences. Everyone hears mashcore, oh that's breakcore, and everyone hears breakcore, oh that's breakcore. Nobody really knows mashcore too well if you're not like deeply into this, and that is fair. They have quite a lot of similarities, you know, sampling, extremely broken drums and chaotic beats, amen breaks, you know, but there is a difference, and I would say it's the level of chaos. Mashcore uses far more samples and tends to be a mesh of all kinds of noises and stimulation. And people, again, classify them as the same, but they really aren't. If you listen close, it is very, 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 very different. They are obviously, one is more chaotic and one tends to be more. Think about it like a room. Breakcore is like a room that is slightly is like maybe a quarter full, and you can kind of think about it like, you know, it's got some stuff going on, but you can still feel that empty space. Mashcore is like if you just stuff the room to the max, like there is no space, there is constantly noise, I guess, if you kind of get what I'm catching, if you're kind of catching what I'm onto. And you know, interestingly enough, Mashcore can have a lot of different things that go into it. For example, hardcore kicks are in some songs. I've at least heard hardcore kicks before, and it's very interesting. It just, again, has to have that same level of chaos. It's very hard to explain the in-depth parts of Mashcore, but if you're interested, you know, artists like Ayuka Kaze, Gorshit, and DJ Kerr are great places to, I guess, listen to some good Mashcore. Just look online in general. You know, anything from, you know, the series called New Folder from Lost Frog Productions on their Bandcamp. You can find those; they're free. Also a good example of Mashcore, and yeah. All right, so on to J-core and J-hardcore. It's kind of interesting and a little hard to explain because it's something that you can really only hear when you listen to it. It's a Japanese version of something called happy hardcore, which I don't really know too much about. I couldn't really find good examples of how to describe it. But in essence, it's very upbeat, obviously, has a lot of synth emphasis, and the kicks aren't too prevalent. So Japanese hardcore and J-core in general are kind of different, but I'll start with, you know, J-core. So J-core uses plenty of samples, tends to be more, I guess, UK happy hardcore-ish, tends to be more synthy and things like that, has less kick emphases and things like that. They use a lot of, you know, let's say like, you know, English samples. They love to use English samples because it's kind of like how we idolize. It's interesting because Japan really idolizes the US, just like how we idolize Japan, even though both have severe issues. You know, but yeah, they have a heavy emphasis on melodies, and in general tend to be more euphoric. Now, J-core tends to be way more tame. J-hardcore is different. J-hardcore to me is like Camellia and Red Alice, and anything from Tano C, honestly, and you know, things like that. It tends to be more like a little more intense, but it still has that Japanese, I guess, melody. It's something that you can really only hear it when you listen to like a song, and it also tends to be the stuff you hear in rhythm games, such as like, you know, Samvoltex, My Beloved. Things like that. You know, if you listen to those kinds of songs, you'll definitely hear the J-hardcore style, and it's very iconic. I always categorize it as something completely different because it just has this feel to it that makes it very, like, you can definitely recognize it. A lot of people consider this mainstream, but I'll talk more about what is mainstream and what isn't. I think it's very interesting. Anyways, yeah, obviously they have their differences, and yeah, it's just, I really can't explain it, but it's a very interesting genre. I think I like it a lot. Obviously, I listen to it a ton. I play a ton of rhythm games, so yeah. Alright, so next genre I really want to talk about is Nightcore. It's kind of like J-core and Speedcore, I guess. I don't really know how to put, like, Nightcore honestly kind of came out of nowhere. Again, I'm trying to, like, talk about, like, merging genres, because that's how I did it on my friggin', like, notebook, but, like, yeah, with this one, it's kind of hard. You know, so Nightcore, there's two different versions. There's trash Nightcore, which is like if you take a song and just speed it up and then kind of pitch it different and then just call it a day. That's like standard YouTube trash in my opinion. And then there's actual Nightcore, which is remixes. Nightcore in general are just remixes of songs that already exist and are sped up by about 15 to 20%-ish. You know, again, YouTube Nightcore tends to be just like speeding up a song, but actual Nightcore is very different. Take, for example, DJ Miracaroon. I mentioned him like once, I think, in another video, like way before. I love DJ Miracaroon. I think he makes a lot of unique Nightcore, although his Nightcore tends to be more techy and synthy, but it still has that core idea of remixing a song and kind of changing that genre, changing that song to make it sound like different, and then speeding it up slightly. Again, it's very hard to explain because you could say like, oh, you know, what if I do this and that? But Nightcore tends to have this very like techy rave feel to it. Another example, for example, that sounds really funny actually when I say it out loud. Sister Maple's songs to put on your iPod. Another good example. I like that one. You know, tends to be more, I guess it has more emphasis on kicks and bass in some songs and kicks in other ones, you know, but it is still Nightcore, again, very early 2000 or like early 2010s. So yeah, another genre that is also kind of based off Nightcore is Lollycore. Now, it sounds really, really bad, but it's not. It's basically just, imagine Mashcore, but you made it like a remix of a song, and then you just made it really, really fast, and then you just layered Mashcore on it. It's not as bad as it sounds, and honestly, it's a really fun to listen to genre, and it tends to go along with breakcore, and it's more experimental-ish. There are goods and bads about it, you know. Some artists are really good at it, like, you know, Gorshit and stuff, and some artists are kind of mid and just make like noise and standard Mashcore. Again, lollycore is really just mashcore, but with a Japanese touch to it. And in general, it's funny because mashcore is more of a Japanese genre, but not really gonna get into that too much. So you kind of get the idea of lollycore. It's not that bad. It just has a really bad name. Alright, so the last one I really wanted to talk about was something called sex trance, which is a really strange name. Again, lollycore vibes. Oh my god, it sounds really bad, but it's really not. You see, it's kind of like a subgenre of a bunch of different like trance things, hardcore, it's like a amalgamation of a bunch of different albums, and it's so hard to describe because it's so different. There are so many different things that kind of make it. Again, in the original version of the script, I was explaining out like a bunch of hardcore trance things, but I decided to skip it and just go right to sex trance because it's honestly just like if I just talk about other trance, I think you'll get confused, and trance in general isn't as popular as it once was. So Anyways, sex trance's origins are kind of unknown, but it was first brought up by this absolute goat that I love named Purity Filter. They are awesome. They're so cool. I love their stuff, and it's basically a version of trance that is like super fast-paced, like speedcore, and has that same vibe of nightcore when you speed up a song really fast. But it also has, unlike nightcore and unlike speedcore, it still feels like euphoric, and it still feels very melodic, and it has that trance synth vibe of very like relaxing synths. And sometimes it can be intense, but it still feels calming in a weird way. It's such a hard to describe feeling. I've listened to it countless times to try and like say it. And it tends to be like anime-ish, I guess, depending on the artist, but it doesn't always have to be. But it's such a hard to describe genre because it's just so different than what you normally hear. Trance. You hear hard trance, for example. It's just trance with hard kicks and just no bass. Or you listen to like psytrance or dark psy. It's just trance, but it feels wavy, I guess. This feels so different than the other genres, and I just could not find a really good way to listen to it, or not listen to it, explain it. And so if you are interested, listen to something like Sienna Sleep. They make some great music for this genre, and Purity Filter, although they're kind of more very different. And you'll notice that a lot of the songs that you hear out of sex trance tends to be very distorted, and that's part of the genre. I don't know, I think it has to do with something I've heard called hexd, which is hexadecimal, which is where you kind of take a song and you distort it in a way that makes it sound compressed. It's super unique, honestly. Just check it out. I highly recommend it. It's super cool, and it's honestly best experienced rather than explained, and I think, yeah, you should check it out. Alright, so there's this one last genre I wanted to talk about that has been gaining a decent amount of traction because it's very new. It's like only about 3-ish years old, literally as a genre. It's called hyperflip, and I really don't know how to describe this genre. It originated from this album called Daria Core, which is where it's a very interesting album. It has its own style, and trying to explain this genre is so hard because it's kind of like nightcore, it's kind of like sex trance in the sense that you take an existing song and remix it, but the way that they remix it tends to be in such a specific way. They have the kicks, whenever there's like a kick, the song feels like it freezes, and that's why I thought maybe it's like flip, because it's like it flips this. I don't know, and so but what people say is that they flip an original song by making it a completely different genre, and then that's how they do it. But I'm like, well, no, because they do it in a very specific way. And so just defining hyperflip is something that is so hard to do because like they have so many different elements that kind of come into it. And I think it's like, again, very new genre, and I think it's a mix of a ton of different stuff, and I really would highly recommend checking it out. It's because it's like, it sounds so specific. This way that they do it sounds so specific, and I think it's so cool for that. If you are interested, I would highly recommend checking out Lost Frog Productions and DJ Rice. Lost Frog Productions has a ton of some new hyperflip stuff coming out. I guess they have a new hyperflip wave of artists, so it's pretty cool. And if you're interested in it, totally check it out. Car Crash and Siren's a great one. That one has a bunch of stuff. Or like Fusion Flip or Fast Fusion. That's a really good one too. And yeah. All right. So as I conclude this video, what is mainstream, right? What is mainstream hardcore? And if you really had to ask me, I honestly say it's nothing. Honestly, everything now is kind of getting popular because the internet obviously has revolutionized everything, and there isn't a genre anymore that dominates the rest because now everyone isn't, now like all the people aren't doing one genre. Now you can see all these different parts of the world, all these different artists that are doing their own unique thing and making it popular too. And it's very interesting because now there are all kinds of hardcores that are getting popular. Sex trance probably would never have gotten that popular in the past, but now because of everything, the internet, it has gotten pretty popular. There are a lot of people who actually really follow it. Now, I will admit, if you're in certain countries, they definitely have their preferences. Eastern places, such as Japan, obviously, prefer J-core and speedcore, and, you know, their usual version of speedcore from, like, Tano-C and stuff like that. And in Western cultures, such as the US and most of Europe, honestly, you'll see a lot of things such as hardstyle and uptempo, and that kind of genre. Euphoric hardstyle, mostly. Now, it is interesting, because I would like to admit that Japan actually has, like, a decent hardstyle scene. Like, you will notice that Japan, well, at least with the Tano-C raves, have, like, a pretty wide variety of people, like, artists, that come in doing all kinds of music. You know, you got speedcore, J-hardcore, hardstyle, things like that. And you know, there are so many other genres I did not talk about, some of which were just very old and obscure, such as like hard NRG or like Machina, things like that, or, you know, Gabber, but Gabber is kind of self-explanatory. And if you guys really want, I can totally do another video. You know, this one kind of was hard to make because of just all the formatting and like planning it all out, but I really just hope you guys enjoyed this one. And yeah, maybe I'll do this again. Who knows? If you guys enjoyed it, I'll definitely do it again. But for now, I'll probably just work on, you know, maybe like another Madness video or something like that. I'll see you guys next time.